She had always been the kind of person who planned everything. Every meeting, every detail of her life was precise, measured, and controlled. Running her own company had given her a sense of power and independence that few could imagine. She had built her career from the ground up, facing obstacles that would have stopped most people. She liked being in control, liked knowing what to expect, and liked believing that she could handle anything life threw at her. But all of that changed in a single moment. A moment so sudden and shocking that it left her world shattered. It was a quiet morning when it happened. She was driving to a meeting she had meticulously prepared for, reviewing notes in her head, thinking about questions she might be asked, planning how she would respond. The streets were calm, the traffic light green, and everything seemed ordinary. Then in an instant everything changed. A truck ran a red light, and before she could even react, her car was hit. The impact was violent and everything went black. When she woke up, she was in a hospital bed, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. Machines beeped around her, and the soft voice of a nurse filled the room with instructions and reassurance. But none of that reached her mind fully. She tried to move her legs to feel the strength she once had, and then panic took over. Nothing happened. She could not move. Not an inch. She was paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors used careful words, trying not to alarm her further, explaining that it might be permanent, that recovery would be difficult, that she would have to adjust her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The reality hit her like a storm. Her career, her independence, her entire life, everything she had built, everything she had fought for, suddenly felt beyond her reach. She lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a sense of despair that was suffocating. She had always been strong, always been in control, but now she felt fragile, helpless, and utterly alone. The days in the hospital were long and exhausting. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, each movement a reminder of what she had lost. She had to rely on nurses and therapists for the simplest tasks: eating, bathing, moving. Every small act of dependence felt like a blow to her pride. She had been the one making decisions, leading teams, solving problems. Now she needed help for everything. She felt trapped in a body that refused to obey her commands, and frustration boiled inside her. Her friends and family tried to be supportive. They visited often, spoke words of encouragement, and tried to make her laugh. But she found it hard to accept their kindness. She felt disconnected from the world she had once navigated with confidence. Conversations that once energized her now seemed distant, as if she were watching life through a glass wall. She began to withdraw, spending long hours alone, staring at the walls, trying to reconcile the woman she used to be with the reality of who she had become. In these quiet moments, she reflected on her life. She remembered her childhood dreams, the ambition that had driven her, the late nights working to build her business. She thought about the moments she had taken for granted, the freedom to walk, to travel, to live without limitations. All of that seemed gone now, and for the first time in her life she questioned her future. Would she ever feel independent again? Would she ever feel joy? The thought seemed impossible. As weeks turned into months, she began to experience the subtle, cruel routines of life after an accident. Even small things were monumental challenges. Dressing herself required patience. Learning to maneuver in a wheelchair demanded strength she didn't feel she had. Every day was a battle against frustration, pain, and the lingering fear that she might never be herself again. She watched as the world moved on without her, as colleagues made decisions, friends celebrated milestones, and life continued beyond the walls of her hospital room and later her home. Her professional life suffered too. She had been a hands-on leader, involved in every aspect of her company. Now she could barely attend meetings without assistance. Calls and emails piled up, decisions were postponed, and the sense of control she had once relied upon slipped further away. She worried about the future of the business she had fought so hard to create. The thought of losing it, of watching her life's work crumble, added to the weight she already carried. Therapy sessions were emotionally draining as well. She tried to stay positive, to push herself, but the setbacks were discouraging. Sometimes she would cry alone, overwhelmed by the reality that she could no longer rely on her own body. The mirror became a source of discomfort. She saw a reflection that felt like a stranger, someone changed and limited by circumstances beyond her control. She mourned the life she had lost. the freedom she had once taken for granted, and the person she had been before the accident. Yet, amid the struggle, there were tiny sparks of hope. A kind nurse who stayed a little longer to chat, a therapist who celebrated small victories, friends who sent messages to remind her she was not alone. These moments were fleeting, but they reminded her that life could still hold meaning. Still, the heaviness of despair often overshadowed these glimmers of light. She had stopped smiling, stopped imagining a future that could bring her joy, stopped believing that happiness could exist for someone in her condition. One day, she was sitting by a window in her apartment, looking out at the bustling city below. She watched people walking, laughing, living lives she once took part in without thought. The world seemed both familiar and distant. She felt a deep longing to reconnect with life, to feel the independence she had lost, yet fear held her back. How could she step back into a world that now seemed so intimidating, so overwhelming? Her friends suggested trying social activities, joining support groups, or even going on dates to help her feel connected again. She resisted. The idea of dating felt impossible. Who could see past her wheelchair? Who could understand the trauma she carried every day? The thought of exposing herself to judgment, pity, or rejection made her retreat further into isolation. She convinced herself that smiles and happiness were things of the past, memories from a life that no longer existed. Still, life had a way of pushing forward, whether she was ready or not. Invitations arrived, small nudges from friends who refused to give up on her. A blind date was arranged, not because she had asked for it, but because those around her wanted to remind her that the world had not ended, that connection was still possible. She felt reluctant, hesitant, and unsure. She considered refusing, but some small part of her, a part that still remembered curiosity, laughter, and joy, allowed her to agree. The night of the blind date, she prepared carefully. She wore an outfit that made her feel confident, did her hair and makeup in ways that reminded her of the woman she used to be. Still, the anxiety was overwhelming. She worried about how the date would go, whether she would feel embarrassed, whether anyone could truly see beyond her disability. She had anticipated disaster, expecting awkward silences, pity, or rejection. As she arrived at the cafe, she scanned the room, heart pounding. Her date had not yet arrived, and she sat alone, feeling exposed and vulnerable. Every noise, every movement seemed amplified, and she was hyper-aware of her body, her wheelchair, her limitations. The cafe buzzed with life, laughter, and conversation, a world moving at a pace she had struggled to keep up with since the accident. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if she should leave, if she should retreat back into the safety of isolation. Then, something unexpected happened. A man entered the cafe, not part of the blind date, but there nonetheless. He was a mechanic, called in to repair a malfunctioning coffee machine, and his presence was entirely unassuming. There was no sense of pretense or expectation, just a quiet focus on the task at hand. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she noticed something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of genuine curiosity. There was no judgment in his gaze, no pity, just a simple recognition of her presence. For reasons she couldn't yet explain, the sight of him stirred something within her. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced since the accident, an acknowledgement that there might be more to life than pain, more to days than struggle. She did not know this man, and yet, the brief interaction planted a seed, a tiny possibility that the world might still hold unexpected moments, moments that could bring smiles, laughter, or connection. She remained seated, watching him work, sensing that something significant had shifted, even if she couldn't yet understand why. As she sat there, the anxiety of the evening mixed with this strange new feeling. The world outside her wheelchair felt distant, yet within this moment, in this ordinary cafe, a hint of life, a glimpse of possibility, began to creep back into her heart. She still faced immense challenges, but for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine that perhaps life could surprise her again, that smiles and joy might not be as impossible as she had believed. She tried to focus on the date that was supposed to happen, but the mechanic remained in her mind. His presence was unexpected and unsettling, not because it caused fear, but because it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. She had spent months wrapping herself in a protective cocoon, refusing to let the outside world touch her emotions. But now something about the simplicity and genuineness in the way he moved and worked stayed with her. Her blind date arrived shortly afterward, stumbling slightly into the cafe. He was polite enough, smiling nervously as he sat across from her. They exchanged pleasantries, trying to make small talk, but everything felt forced. The conversation stumbled along, awkward silences growing longer, the tension rising. She realized quickly that this person was nothing like the mechanic. He was concerned with impressing her, talking about wealth, status, and accomplishments. His words felt hollow, and she could not hide her growing boredom and irritation. Halfway through the coffee, she found her attention drifting to the mechanic again. He was moving around the cafe, fixing the machine with careful attention, talking quietly to the staff. There was a quiet confidence in the way he handled things, a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the anxiety and superficiality of her date. She caught his eye again, and this time he offered a small nod, acknowledging her presence without any expectation. Her lips twitched slightly in response, a tiny smile that she barely recognized as her own. She forced herself back to the blind date, but her mind kept wandering. Every word he said seemed less important compared to the genuine nature of the man across the room. She began to feel frustrated at herself for even being on this date, realizing how little she connected with the person sitting in front of her. The conversation felt like an obligation rather than a choice, a hollow exercise that left her feeling drained instead of alive. The date ended awkwardly, with polite goodbyes and promises to stay in touch that she knew she would not keep. Relief washed over her as she left the cafe, grateful to escape the strained conversation. She pushed open the door to step outside, and the fresh air hit her like a wave, a mix of freedom and lingering disappointment. She wondered why the evening, which was supposed to be a step toward normalcy, had felt so empty. Just as she was about to wheel herself toward her car, she heard a voice behind her. It was the mechanic, holding a small cup of coffee he had been given by the cafe staff. He offered it to her with a simple, "Here, I thought you might like this." There was no expectation, no pressure, just a quiet gesture of kindness. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept it, but something about the sincerity in his eyes made her take it. She felt warmth she hadn't experienced in months, a small reminder that human connection could exist outside the walls of her own carefully controlled life. They started talking, at first about trivial things, the cafe, the coffee machine, the chaos of the morning, but gradually the conversation deepened. He asked questions about her life, genuinely curious, not judging or pitying her. She found herself laughing at small jokes he made, her body relaxing in ways it hadn't for a long time. She noticed how easy it felt to talk to him, how natural it was to share thoughts without fear of judgment. It was a stark contrast to the stiffness of her blind date, and it surprised her how comforting his presence felt. As the days passed, their paths crossed repeatedly by chance. Sometimes he would be repairing something at her office, other times at the cafe, and gradually these encounters became more than coincidence. She began looking forward to seeing him, to sharing brief moments of genuine conversation. It wasn't a relationship in the traditional sense. There were no expectations, no rush, but it was a connection that slowly started to rekindle feelings she thought were long gone. Her friends noticed the change in her. They commented on her small smiles, the way her posture seemed a little less tense, the spark in her eyes that had been absent since the accident. She tried to brush it off, claiming it was nothing, but inside she knew something significant was happening. She was starting to feel alive again, not because her physical condition had changed, but because someone had entered her life who treated her as a person first, not as a patient or a project. One afternoon, while they were sitting outside the cafe sharing a quiet conversation, a sudden problem with her wheelchair arose. The mechanism had jammed and she struggled to maneuver. Without hesitation, he reached over and adjusted it carefully, explaining what he was doing in simple, clear terms. There was no condescension in his voice, only practical concern. She watched him work, feeling a strange mix of relief and admiration. She realized she had begun trusting him, not blindly, but with a cautious openness she hadn't allowed anyone in a long time. Their conversations expanded beyond the immediate practical concerns of life. They shared stories of childhood dreams, small failures, and humorous mishaps that had shaped who they were. She spoke of her business, of the challenges she had faced, and even of the accident in a way that felt safe and unpressured. He shared his experiences as a mechanic, the satisfaction of fixing problems, the pride in his work, and the simple joys he found in everyday life. Each story, each exchange, slowly chipped away at the walls she had built around herself. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, she found herself walking to the cafe, drawn there without fully understanding why. He was there, tinkering with another machine, and when he saw her, he smiled. It wasn't a forced smile meant to impress, but an honest, warm expression that made her heart feel lighter. She realized she had come here not out of obligation, but because she wanted to see him, because being near him made her feel more human than she had in months. They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily. She realized that she had not felt this kind of comfort in a long time, this ease of being herself without pretense or judgment. She laughed more freely, shared thoughts she usually kept hidden, and for the first time in months felt the possibility of happiness. The accident and the months of struggle had left scars, both physical and emotional, but in his presence, those scars felt less defining, less permanent. It was during one of these encounters that she realized how much she had been missing out on by isolating herself. Life had been moving on around her, and while the accident had changed her world, it had not ended it. She began to see that joy did not require perfection, nor did connection demand complete recovery. It was possible to find small, meaningful moments of happiness even within a life that had been deeply altered. The mechanic never pushed, never pressured, but his consistent presence was transformative. He treated her with respect, kindness, and genuine interest. She began to trust herself again, to trust her ability to engage with the world despite her limitations. The small smiles became more frequent, the laughter more genuine, and the sense of despair that had dominated her life slowly gave way to cautious optimism. Through these repeated encounters, she discovered a new rhythm of life. She learned to appreciate small victories, whether it was maneuvering her wheelchair more easily, completing a task she thought impossible, or simply enjoying a conversation without fear. Each moment reinforced the idea that life could still offer connection, joy, and meaning, even in the shadow of tragedy. The story of her blind date that evening faded into the background, a reminder that not every social effort yielded success. The mechanic, on the other hand, became a symbol of unexpected kindness, of the possibility that life could surprise her in ways she had not imagined. She began to look forward to his presence, not as a distraction from her struggles, but as a companion in navigating them. By the end of part 2, she found herself smiling more openly, feeling emotions she thought had been lost forever. The days of isolation and despair were not gone, but they no longer dominated her existence. A sense of hope had returned, fragile yet persistent, carried not by grand gestures but by small, consistent moments of human connection. In the unlikeliest of ways, she realized that life might still hold joy, and perhaps even love in forms she could not yet fully understand. Over the following weeks, their encounters became more frequent. The mechanic's presence in her life grew from random coincidence to something she found herself anticipating. He had a way of being both unremarkable and unforgettable at the same time. There was nothing extraordinary about him on the surface. He worked with his hands, fixed things, and spoke in simple, clear ways. But it was precisely this grounded nature that drew her in. For the first time since her accident, she found herself looking forward to something, to someone. Without fear or calculation, she began to notice small details about him that had escaped her before. The way his hands moved with precision when he worked, the quiet determination in his gaze, and the ease with which he treated others. There was no arrogance, no need to impress, no hidden agendas. It was refreshing, almost healing. Each interaction made her feel lighter, more alive, as if the weight of months of despair was gradually lifting. Their conversations grew deeper. One afternoon, they were sitting on a bench outside the cafe, watching the city move around them. She told him about the accident in fragments at first, as though testing the waters. He listened patiently, never interrupting, never offering pity. When she paused, unsure of what to say next, he simply nodded, letting silence fill the spaces comfortably. It was a stark contrast to the shallow exchanges she had experienced on blind dates or with acquaintances. He made her feel seen and heard without judgment. He shared stories of his life too, but they were not grand tales of adventure or wealth. Instead, they were stories of work, mistakes, lessons learned, and moments of quiet joy. She found herself laughing at his clumsy encounters with stubborn machines and smiling at the way he described the pride he took in small victories. It was simple, unassuming, and yet entirely captivating. She realized that life did not need to be spectacular to be meaningful. It could be beautiful in its ordinary moments. Their bond deepened in subtle ways. He noticed when she struggled with her wheelchair or seemed tense, offering help in gentle, unobtrusive ways. She initially resisted, not wanting to feel dependent, but he never pressured her. His calm, steady presence made it easier for her to accept support, to allow herself to be vulnerable in ways she had avoided for so long. Each small act of kindness, each shared laugh, chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One rainy afternoon, the cafe was nearly empty. She had come in to escape the chill, and he was repairing a leaky faucet in the restroom. She watched him work, fascinated by his focus and determination. The sound of rain against the windows created a quiet rhythm, and they spoke softly about trivial things at first. Weather, small accidents, their plans for the week. Gradually, the conversation shifted to more personal topics, and she found herself opening up about her fears, her frustrations, and her sense of loss. He listened with the same patient attention, never interrupting, never minimizing her feelings. It was during moments like these that she realized how much she had missed genuine human connection. For months she had been isolated, trapped in her own despair, afraid to trust anyone. Now she felt safe enough to express herself, to share emotions she had kept buried. The mechanic's steady presence became a source of comfort, a reminder that she did not have to face her challenges alone. They began spending more time together outside of chance encounters. He would meet her at the cafe, and they would go for short walks, navigating the accessible paths she had carefully chosen. Sometimes they would sit in a park, talking about life, the universe, and everything in between. The city felt different when he was around, less intimidating, more approachable. The small joys of movement, conversation, and companionship became something she looked forward to eagerly. Despite the growing closeness, there were moments of tension and vulnerability. She still struggled with feelings of inadequacy and dependence, fearing that her paralysis made her less capable or less worthy of attention. At times she would withdraw, testing the boundaries of the connection, unsure if she could truly trust someone to care without judgment. Each time he met her hesitance with patience, never forcing intimacy, never demanding more than she was willing to give. It was in this patient, consistent approach that trust was slowly rebuilt. One evening, after a long day at work, she invited him to her apartment to help with a small repair that had been bothering her for weeks. Watching him work, she noticed how effortlessly he focused on the task, how meticulous he was, and how natural it felt to have someone there who cared about the little details of her life. When the repair was done, they sat together quietly, sipping tea and listening to the soft hum of the city outside. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sensation she had not experienced in a long time. It was comfort, connection, and a sense of normalcy all at once. As days turned into weeks, she began to see changes within herself. The constant anxiety and frustration that had dominated her life began to ebb, replaced by moments of joy and lightness. She started smiling more, laughing more freely, and allowing herself to enjoy experiences she had previously avoided. Her perspective on life shifted subtly but profoundly. She realized that happiness did not require perfection, nor did connection demand complete recovery. It was possible to experience joy even amidst challenges, even with scars that would never fully fade. She also noticed changes in how she approached her work. Though her physical limitations remained, she began to find ways to engage more actively, relying on her team without feeling like a failure. The confidence she regained in her personal life began to spill over into her professional life, and she discovered that she could still lead effectively, inspire her team, and make decisions that mattered. Her resilience, once tested by accident and despair, was now tempered by hope and connection. The mechanic remained a constant, grounding presence throughout these changes. He did not seek to change her or solve her problems, but his support, humor, and genuine interest in her well-being created a safe space where she could explore emotions she had long avoided. In turn, she began to appreciate the quiet strength he possessed, the kind that did not need recognition or praise, but simply existed to help and support others. One afternoon, while they were repairing a loose railing near her apartment, she tripped slightly and he caught her instantly. The rush of gratitude and relief she felt was overwhelming, and for the first time in months she allowed herself to express genuine emotion without reservation. Tears came unbidden, but he held her steady, offering comfort without words. In that moment she realized that she had begun to rely on him not out of weakness, but because she trusted him completely. The vulnerability she had feared now felt like a gift, a bridge to deeper human connection. Their relationship continued to develop slowly, naturally, without the need for grand gestures or declarations. It was built on trust, patience, and mutual respect, with each day offering small moments of joy and understanding. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, their shared laughter, and even the quiet silences that spoke volumes. For the first time since the accident, she felt alive, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. By the end of this period, she realized that the accident, while tragic and life-altering, had not taken away her capacity for happiness. It had changed her, yes, but it had also opened the door to new experiences, new relationships, and new ways of seeing the world. She understood that resilience was not just about surviving, but about embracing life with all its imperfections and finding moments of connection and joy wherever they could be found. Part 3 ends with her beginning to embrace the possibility of a future that includes hope, friendship, and perhaps love. She had started to smile again, not because life was perfect, but because she had found someone who made her feel seen, valued, and alive in ways she had thought were lost forever. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that happiness, even in unexpected forms, was still possible. Despite the growing closeness with the mechanic, shadows of fear and doubt often crept into her mind. She had spent months hiding from the world, guarding her heart, and the thought of being vulnerable again was both thrilling and terrifying. Old memories of the accident haunted her, moments of panic, helplessness, and frustration resurfacing when she least expected them. She questioned whether she truly deserved happiness, whether she could allow someone so simple and honest into the complex, fractured world she had been navigating alone. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, she sat alone in her apartment, reflecting on her progress and setbacks. The weight of responsibilities combined with the lingering pain of her paralysis made her feel exhausted and fragile. She thought about the small victories she had achieved recently, the moments of joy with the mechanic, and yet a sense of fear lingered. Could she truly embrace life again? Could she trust someone enough to let herself smile without hesitation? The mechanic arrived that evening as planned, unaware of the storm of doubt she was experiencing. He greeted her with a calm, steady smile, carrying a small box of tools and a thermos of tea. His presence was soothing, the simplicity of his intentions a stark contrast to the complexity swirling in her mind. She welcomed him quietly, grateful for his reliability, even if her emotions felt tangled and uncertain. They worked together on minor repairs in her apartment, tasks that seemed mundane but carried deeper significance. Each shared task became an opportunity for connection, a way to rebuild trust and comfort in the presence of another person. She noticed how effortlessly he adapted to her needs, how patient he was with her limitations, and how natural it felt to collaborate without feeling judged. The simplicity of their interactions carried an unspoken depth, a reassurance that life could still hold meaning despite its difficulties. During a break, they sat by the window watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. She spoke hesitantly about her fears, the moments of despair that occasionally surfaced, and the uncertainty that accompanied her recovery. He listened without interruption, offering gentle nods and encouraging words. He did not try to fix her problems or offer solutions. He simply validated her feelings, showing that vulnerability could be shared without fear of rejection. It was a revelation for her, realizing that openness could be met with patience and understanding rather than judgment. As their conversations deepened, she began confronting emotions she had long suppressed. Memories of the accident, the months of isolation, and the sense of helplessness resurfaced, but they no longer felt as suffocating. With his presence as a steady anchor, she found the courage to explore these feelings, to acknowledge pain without letting it define her. She discovered that strength was not about hiding vulnerability, but about embracing it and allowing others to share in her journey. Their bond strengthened as they navigated challenges together. Simple acts, adjusting her wheelchair, fixing broken appliances, sharing meals became powerful symbols of trust and companionship. She learned to accept help without feeling diminished, and he learned to anticipate her needs with sensitivity and respect. Each interaction reinforced the idea that relationships could be built on mutual care, patience, and understanding, rather than grand gestures or superficial attraction. One afternoon, she received troubling news about her company. A project she had been overseeing faced unexpected setbacks, threatening the stability of her business. Panic and self-doubt surged, reminding her of the fragility she had felt during her initial recovery. The mechanic arrived shortly afterwards, sensing her distress. Without judgment, he listened as she vented frustrations and fears. He offered quiet support, suggesting practical steps without overwhelming her with solutions. His presence helped her regain focus, providing the emotional steadiness she needed to confront challenges rather than retreat from them. Through these experiences, she realized that life's difficulties had not vanished, but they could be faced differently. The emotional resilience she had built, combined with the support of someone who genuinely cared, gave her the confidence to navigate adversity with composure. The mechanic's influence was subtle yet profound, reminding her that connection, patience, and trust could transform even the most daunting obstacles into manageable challenges. Gradually, she began to integrate joy and spontaneity back into her life. Small outings became shared adventures, visiting parks, exploring accessible streets, and discovering hidden corners of the city. These moments, while simple, held immense significance. They reminded her that life could still be rich with experience, even with limitations. The laughter, the shared discoveries, and the sense of mutual presence became a foundation for rebuilding her emotional and mental well-being. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day of collaboration and conversation, she realized she had laughed freely and without hesitation for the first time in months. The sound of her own laughter startled her, reminding her of the distance she had traveled from the despair that once dominated her life. The mechanic noticed the change, smiling quietly, and she felt a warmth that went beyond gratitude, an understanding that human connection could indeed foster healing and hope. Despite these positive changes, moments of doubt and fear still surfaced. She sometimes questioned whether happiness was fleeting, whether setbacks would undo the progress she had made. Yet with each encounter, she learned to face these fears with a growing sense of resilience. She understood that vulnerability and strength could coexist, that trust could be nurtured gradually, and that joy could emerge even amidst uncertainty. Their relationship continued to evolve, built on shared experiences, trust, and authentic interaction. The mechanic remained a constant grounding presence, demonstrating through actions rather than words that care and understanding could be steadfast and unwavering. She began to rely on him not out of necessity alone, but because his presence enriched her life, offering companionship, comfort, and a sense of being truly seen. As Part 4 progresses, she confronts lingering insecurities and fears, learning to embrace vulnerability and trust. She begins to smile and laugh genuinely, finding solace and hope in the simplicity of human connection. The mechanic's consistent, patient presence demonstrates that healing is a gradual process, strengthened by compassion, understanding, and the courage to face one's emotional challenges. By the end of this part, she stands at the threshold of a new chapter. While the accident and its consequences remain a part of her reality, she has discovered that life can still offer moments of joy, connection, and resilience. The journey is ongoing, but she now possesses the emotional tools and support to navigate it with a renewed sense of hope and optimism. In the quiet, ordinary moments shared with the mechanic, she realizes that healing is not about perfection, but about embracing life's complexities with courage, trust, and the willingness to allow happiness to return. Over time, the bond between her and the mechanic grew stronger, steady, and unspokenly significant. It was not a dramatic romance filled with sudden confessions or grand gestures. Instead, it was a connection built on patience, trust, and countless small moments that reminded her life could still hold warmth and joy. Each day brought subtle changes. A smile here, a laugh there, the simple comfort of someone being present without expectation. She began to notice how the ordinary routines of life felt different when he was around. Going to the cafe was no longer just a place to escape solitude. It became a shared experience, a place where conversation flowed freely and small joys were discovered. She could laugh openly at his stories, marvel at his simple solutions to everyday problems, and feel a sense of companionship she hadn't known since before her accident. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not the person she had been before, but a stronger, more patient version of her old self. Their interactions extended beyond practical matters. On weekends, they would explore accessible parts of the city, wander through parks, or simply sit in quiet places watching the world move around them. These moments, while seemingly ordinary, carried a profound significance. They were opportunities to share experiences, to laugh, to talk about life's complexities, and to simply enjoy the presence of another person. Each outing strengthened the sense that life could still offer meaningful experiences, even with limitations. One afternoon, she faced a particularly challenging moment. She had been called to her office to address a sudden business crisis. The project she had been overseeing faced unexpected setbacks, and for a moment she felt the familiar panic rising. She realized how much she had come to rely on the support of others, and yet she felt ready to confront the situation. The mechanic accompanied her to the building, not to intervene, but simply to be present, to offer reassurance through his calm and steady demeanor. His presence grounded her, helping her focus and approach the challenge with confidence rather than fear. At the office, she led her team with clarity and determination. Though her mobility was limited, her mind remained sharp and decisive. The months of struggle, therapy, and reflection had fortified her resilience. She navigated the crisis successfully, realizing that her strength did not lie solely in independence, but also in her ability to adapt, trust others, and face difficulties with patience and thoughtfulness. The crisis was resolved not through heroics but through calm determination and effective collaboration. After the day ended, she returned to the cafe where the mechanic was waiting. The relief of success mingled with the warmth of his presence. They shared a quiet meal, talking softly about the day, their thoughts and plans for the coming weeks. She laughed freely, a sound that felt genuine and unburdened by the weight of past struggles. For the first time, she truly recognized the depth of their bond, not as a fleeting connection, but as a steady, meaningful partnership built on trust and understanding. Over time, the mechanic became an integral part of her life. He was there for practical tasks, sure, but more importantly, he offered emotional support and companionship. She learned to embrace his presence, to rely on him without fear, and to enjoy the simple moments of life again. She realized that happiness did not require perfection, grand gestures, or flawless circumstances. It existed in laughter, shared experiences, trust, and the quiet moments that made ordinary days feel extraordinary. One weekend, they decided to visit a small park she had always enjoyed before the accident. The weather was calm, the sun casting soft light on the paths. She maneuvered her wheelchair along familiar routes, feeling a sense of freedom and normalcy she hadn't felt in months. They stopped by a bench near a pond, the water reflecting sunlight like scattered diamonds. They sat quietly, sipping tea and watching ducks glide across the surface. The simplicity of the moment was perfect in its own way. She realized that life could still hold beauty and serenity, even amidst change and limitation. In these quiet moments, she reflected on her journey, the accident, the months of struggle, the fear, and the isolation. She acknowledged the pain, the setbacks, and the uncertainty, but she also recognized the growth, resilience, and joy she had rediscovered. The mechanic's consistent presence had helped her reclaim parts of herself she had thought were lost. His patience, understanding, and genuine care reminded her that connection could heal wounds that seemed permanent. The story's climax was subtle, not dramatic, yet deeply meaningful. She realized that the smile she had once thought lost forever was not only returning but had become natural and effortless. She could laugh freely, feel joy in ordinary experiences, and trust someone with her emotions again. The emotional scars remained, but they no longer defined her. She had learned that vulnerability could coexist with strength, that dependence could be a source of connection rather than weakness. and that life's unexpected turns could still lead to happiness. As weeks turned into months, their relationship continued to flourish quietly. They celebrated small milestones together, the successful completion of projects, personal victories, and simple joys like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Each moment reinforced the understanding that life, though changed, was still rich with experiences worth savoring. She felt more capable, more resilient, and more alive than she had in months. Ultimately, the story concluded not with grand declarations, but with a profound sense of contentment and hope. She had faced one of the most challenging periods of her life and emerged not unchanged, but transformed in meaningful ways. The mechanic, through his simple, steady presence, had helped her rediscover laughter, trust, and joy. Their bond was quiet yet powerful, a testament to the healing potential of human connection. By the end of Part 5, she embraced life fully once again. Her smile was no longer hesitant. It was genuine. She had learned that joy could be found in ordinary moments, that trust could be built patiently, and that love and connection could exist even in the aftermath of hardship. The story closes with her looking out at the city, feeling a sense of peace, strength, and hope. She understood that life was unpredictable, that challenges would continue, but she was no longer afraid. She had discovered that resilience, human connection, and the courage to embrace vulnerability could bring light even to the darkest days, and that the possibility of happiness and love remained alive in unexpected and beautiful ways.